Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today I'll be analyzing the 2018 House of Representatives election. So this is going to be a long video, just because of the amount of complexities there are in this race, the amount of races that there are to call in general, and I won't be analyzing each race individually, obviously. That'd be crazy, that'd be an hours and hours long video. I won't be doing that. However, a few days ago I did take the time out of my day to look at each state's competitive House races, if that state had any competitive House races at all, and call them Democrat or Republican, depending on analyzing the same factors I normally would in a presidential or a Senate race. And that's fundraising, incumbent advantage, race, ethnicity, ideology of the candidates, the same stuff I look at when calling any other election. I won't be doing that in this video. If you would like any race in particular to be analyzed or explained more thoroughly, leave a comment and I'll respond and explain to the best of my ability, but I won't be doing it in this video just for the interest of time. And even then, even when I'm going through each race with giving very little explanation, just because I really can't for each one, or each competitive one, this video is going to end up being like 30 or 45 minutes long. This is already my fourth take doing this video. It's going to be a long video, so 30 or 45 minutes, I imagine that'll be about the length. So let's start with Arizona. As we can see here, there's one seat that's held by a Republican that's already leaning towards Democrats. That's Martha McSally's seat. She's running for the Senate. This district already went to Hillary Clinton by a pretty decent margin. Martha McSally barely edged it out, so this seat's already likely to go Democrat. Then Tom O'Halloran's seat is up here. This district went to Trump in 2016, and Tom O'Halloran barely edged it out. And this district overall is rated likely not leaning. The only reason why it's this shade at all is because 270 to win just averages together all the 4 or 5 different election sites that they have on their website. This isn't an accurate depiction of how the race actually is. As you can see in the corner, there's pro and then there's mine. A pro rating would be likely, but just take this reading with a grain of salt is basically what I'm saying. So let's look at I organized the different categories into worst case scenario, best case scenario, and likely scenario for the Democrats, not for the Republicans. The worst case scenario for the Democrats is that they lose one seat, meaning that they don't win the seat at all, and this seat goes to whichever Republican challenger is running in this seat, and they lose the seat that they already have. So they lose one seat. That's their worst case scenario. Best case scenario is they win 2 seats, meaning that they keep this seat. They keep the seat that they already have. They win this seat, and then they win another seat in this Phoenix, Mesa, Scottsdale area that's listed as mostly likely Republican. That's not a likely scenario. That's the best case scenario, but I think it's a pretty reasonable best case scenario. As for the likely scenario, I think the Democrats are likely to win 1 seat, and that seat is probably going to be Martha McSally's seat, and I think it's likely that they'll hold on to this seat as well, just given the general trend towards the Democrats in the state in general. I think that Tom O'Halloran will probably keep this seat in the 2018 elections, and the Democrats will probably win this seat. That's the likely scenario. Democrats +1 in Arizona. Now going over to Arkansas, there's really just one race to talk about in this state, and that's this district in the Little Rock area, who has French Hill as the representative. He's been the incumbent for 2 terms, and the only reason why this state I think is competitive at all, or it's been listed as competitive at all, is because the challenger, the Democratic challenger, is a former representative himself. He was a representative in Arizona during the 90s, I believe. He's a Democratic conservative, and I think he has good crossover appeal. But even then, I don't think it's likely, and for that reason, worst case scenario, Democrats get nothing from this state. Best case scenario, the Democrats get that seat. They manage to edge it out. The likely scenario is Democrats get nothing. I don't think the Democrats are likely to win this district. The only reason why it's on this list at all is because a number of races has this as a leaning Republican and not likely Republican. So that's the only reason I wanted to talk about it. Now for California, I believe that's a very important state when it comes to the midterms. And I believe it's the state that's the key for the Democrats to take the majority in the House of Representatives. And this is because there are about 4 to 5 toss-ups in this state, depending on which prediction site you're looking at. 1 or 2 Democratic incumbent seats likely, 1 Republican seat leaning Democrat, meaning that there's 1 currently Republican seat that's already being called in Democrats' column. That's Darrell Iss's seat. I'll talk about that a little bit. and there's 4 to 5 Republican seat toss-ups. The worst case scenario of the Democrats, I think the Democrats, even in their worst case scenario, will get 2 seats out of this state. And this is because this state, I think, will go in their column even in their worst case scenario, just because it went to Darrell Issa by such a narrow margin in 2016, and he's no longer running either, so they lose their incumbency advantage. This district also went to Hillary Clinton in 2016. There are a number of factors working against the Republicans that I think it make it pretty hard to win this seat, even in the Democrats' worst case scenario, or in the Republicans' best case scenario. So for that reason, this state would be in their column either way. And given the amount of toss-ups there are in the Republicans' column, I think the Democrats are likely to get at least 1 toss-up from the Republicans in their worst case scenario. So for that reason, worst case scenario for the Democrats, 2 seats. They'll be winning 2 seats even in their worst case scenario. Best case scenario is 7 seats. That's a pretty conservative estimate for a best case scenario, given the fact that there's a lot of likely Republican seats rather than solid seats that Democrats could pick up in their best case scenario. And so in their best case scenario, basically the Democrats win all the toss-up seats. This one seat that's already called in their columns, that's 6 or 5 in their column already. They win, and then they win like 1 or 2 likely seats. So that's a pretty reasonable best case scenario. But in their likely scenario, I think the Democrats are going to win 5, and that's just this one toss-up, and then they win most of just this one seat that's already called in their column, and then they win most of the toss-ups except for 1 or 2. That's their likely scenario. Like I said, this is the state that I think the Democrats can have the biggest gains in. I don't think that there's any other state where they will be winning 5 seats in. So that's California. Going into Colorado, there's really just 1 seat I want to talk about in particular, and that's this seat in the Aurora, Denver area. So Mike Kaufman, he's done a very good job at going down the middle in this seat, because this seat did go by like 6 or 7 points to Hillary Clinton's 2016 election, and he barely edged it out then. I think he's been very self-aware of the predicament that he's in, and he's been playing it very much down the middle. He's not supported a lot of the policies and bills and laws that Trump has wanted to pass. He's been very critical of Trump on a number of things, which is a smart move to make, considering that the majority of these people in the seat do not support Trump. This seat's very hard to call, which is why there's a question mark. Whenever there's a question mark next to a seat, that means that it's a pretty difficult call to make, which it is. What it could come down to in this seat is it could just be a yes or no approval on Trump, and not so much on Mike Kaufman. If that's the case, then the state will go to Democrats. But if that isn't the case, if it's not so much just based on solely on Trump's approval, I mean, Mike Kaufman has been outraising his competitor in this seat. Like I said, he has done a very good job playing it down the middle as a Republican. And for that reason, I'm hesitantly calling it in his favor, meaning the Democrats get no gains in the seat at all. That's a very hard call to make. That could change depending on, like I said, Trump is the biggest factor in the seat, whether or not it comes down to them just voting based on Trump, but I don't think that's what's going to come down to, so I'm hesitantly putting in the Republicans column. Now going to Florida. There's a number of different risks and risky seats for the Democrats in general in this state. I'll really just be analyzing these 2 seats down here. There's 1 seat that's currently Republican held that's already leading the Democrats' column. That's mostly because this seat did go to Hillary Clinton by a pretty decent margin in 2016, and the incumbent that barely won this seat to begin with in 2016 is not running. So that's pretty comparable to Darrell Issa's seat in California, which is why it's leaning. But if we're looking at worst case scenario, Democrats win nothing. I think it's that in the worst case scenario, they will not win this toss-up down here, which we'll talk about in a second, and they'll also lose this seat down here. That's their worst case scenario. Best case scenario, they win 3 seats. That means they win this toss-up, they win this seat that's already in their column, and they win one of these likely seats up here. That's their best case scenario. Likely, they will just win this seat. I don't think that they're going to win this seat, and that's because this seat is held by a Hispanic incumbent, and the person running against him is not Hispanic herself. And I know identity politics is something I routinely bring up whenever calling elections, and it's not something I love. I never love identity politics, but regardless, it's a big factor, and it probably is the largest factor in elections. That's why I talk about it so frequently. And I think that in this seat's going to come down to identity politics and the fact that the incumbent the incumbent in this seat is Hispanic and has been playing it down the middle when it comes to Trump as well. So for that reason, I would call it for Carlos Curbelo, and likely I think the Democrats will just win that seat that's already in their column. So that's one gain out of Florida. Now going over to Georgia. So the only seat that I think is worthwhile to talk about is Karen Handel's seat. We all saw Ossoff versus Karen Handel earlier in the year. This was the first special election that was talked about shortly after Trump's election, and she did win the special election. The only reason why I think it's a lean for her is just because of how competitive it was back then. But honestly, for a lot of these special election districts that are up again in November, generally I would call it in the favor of whoever won the special election, and the poll seems to agree with that statement as well. I think that unless the incumbent in the who won the special election is doing a very poor job, they're likely to win. And Karen Handel has not had heavy criticism from the left thus far. So for that reason, I don't think that the Democrats are going to win that seat. So just running through, worst case scenario, they get nothing. Best case scenario, they win that one seat from Karen Handel. Likely scenario, they get nothing. I don't think that they're going to win the seat from Karen Handel. Now going over to Illinois. There's really just like two seats that I'm going to talk about thoroughly, and that's these two toss-ups. I've analyzed both these districts thoroughly. If you guys have any questions, like I said, on specifics, leave them down below. But overall, I think the Democrats have a pretty good shot at winning at least one of those seats. Their worst-case scenario, I think they win nothing. The Republicans manage to hold on to both these toss-ups, and the Democrats keep all their currently held seats. That's the worst-case scenario for the Democrats. Best-case scenario is the Democrats win 3 seats. That'd be both the toss-ups and one of these likely seats over here. Likely scenario, I think Democrats will win 1 seat. I don't think they're going to win both toss-ups just because in at least one of the toss-ups, the Republican has a slight advantage in fundraising. I think Democrats will probably win this seat here and not this seat down here. So yeah, likely scenario is Democrats win one of the toss-ups, but not both. Now going down to Iowa. This state is kind of a mess when it comes to election predictions on a district basis, because there's so many different election prediction sites that has different calls to make. Like, I think Sabato's Crystal Ball has this as a toss-up. Another one has this as solid, and this is likely. Another one has this not as solid blue. It's kind of a mess, but this is just the averages together. And again, take this with a grain of salt, as I said before with Arizona. But looking at it here, there's at least one Republican seat likely, and there's at least 2 Republican seat toss-ups. That might be not what is listed here, but most election sites has this as a toss-up as well, and not leaning in the Republicans' column. Worst case scenario, Democrats win nothing. The Republicans keep both these seats. Likely scenario, or the best case scenario, the Democrats win both these seats here. The Republicans keep that 1 seat, and the Democrats hold 3 out of the 4 seats in Iowa. Likely scenario, I think Democrats will win at least 1 seat. Just looking at how risky it is for Republicans in general, just looking at these 3 seats that are Republican held, I think that Democrats are likely to win at least one of these seats. Probably this seat up here that's listed as a toss-up overall. I see the Democrats gaining 1 seat in Iowa. Now going over to Kansas, I think it's a pretty interesting state overall. These 2 seats, I think most would call leaning Republican, not likely Republican, but there are a few that call it as toss-up, so for that reason, 270 win listed as toss-up. I don't know what their method is really when calling these states, because there are a number of different calls that are being made for these 2 districts. But regardless, there's a strong progressive movement that we're seeing in Kansas overall that's growing and growing, as we've seen with Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez visiting the state last month. But best case scenario, I think Democrats in the best case scenario will win both these seats. I don't think it's likely, but that's their best case scenario, given that both these seats are listed as toss-ups. Their likely scenario, I think that they'll win at least 1 seat. At least one of these, I think that the Democrats are likely to win. And for a state that like Kansas, that's pretty good for them, I think. Kentucky, let's analyze it over here. The only district we'll be looking at is this one up here. Andy Barr is the Republican incumbent in this seat, and the only reason why this seat is so competitive is because of the candidate on the Democrat side. I don't remember her name, but she released a video, or a campaign video, I think almost last year, that went viral. She's a former Air Force veteran. She, I think for in most regards, is a conservative Democrat, and I think that worst case scenario, Democrats obviously win nothing. Best case scenario, they win that one seat. I think it's likely to go to Democrats, just given the incumbent, or not the incumbent, but the challenger, I think is probably the best candidate that Democrats could run in this seat overall. Not to mention that this seat is, in general, more Democrat-friendly, or it should be more Democrat-friendly, given the fact that it's Lexington, Frankfort, they're all in this district. Oh, I didn't mean to fill that in. So for that reason, maybe there should be, I'm going to put a question mark just because I wouldn't call it solidly in the Democrats' favor. There is some uncertainty regarding this district, but still, I think that the Democrats are likely to win this seat, just given how things are going. Now going over to Maine, there's really just one district to talk about, and that's the one up here. We saw this district go heavily in Trump's column in 2016, and I think given Trump's approval and the fact that it's listed by most as Republican-friendly, I would call it, I would say it's likely Democrats will not win this seat and they'll win nothing in Maine. Now going over to Michigan, when looking at the state, your instinct is probably to say that Democrats are going to make big gains in the state, but I really don't think it's the case. The most likely they'll not win any of these seats over here, and maybe one of these toss-ups, but let's look at it over here. Worst case scenario, the Democrats win nothing, obviously. Best case scenario, the Democrats win 3, and that's these two toss-ups here, and one of these likely seats over here. Likely scenario, I think the Democrats will win one of these toss-ups, not both of them. I don't think it's likely that they'll win both. Just given that both of these seats, when I analyzed them, showed more Republican friendliness. At least one of them did when I analyzed them. Also with fundraising, I think that the Republicans are outraced the Democrats in these seats. So likely Democrats will win one of those seats. Minnesota is a mess. Minnesota is a mess overall when it comes to the current calls being made for the U.S. representatives in 2018. And that's because there are two seats that are Democratic held, that are toss-ups. I think those are the only two Democratic seats that are toss-ups for the 2018 election. And then there's two Republican seats that are toss-ups as well. So it's really it's going to be very bloody in this state overall come 2018. And who knows how it'll turn out. Worst case scenario for Democrats, they lose both those seats. The Republicans keep both these seats that are toss-ups, and the Democrats lose both seats that are listed in toss-ups in their column. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario, the Democrats keep both these seats and they win both Republican-held toss-ups. Likely scenario, there's a question mark because this state is very uncertain overall. Maybe the Democrats keep both these seats, win one Republican seat, the Republicans win another. They lose one seat, win both of these, making their net gain 1. So overall, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that it's likely that the Democrats will win one seat, but there's a lot of different math and net gains rather than gains overall in this state to consider. And this also district over here that's not solid in Democrats' column is something to consider as well. So yeah, I think that Minnesota is the biggest battleground state overall, just given the amount of competitiveness in these districts. Moving on to Montana, I think the only reason this state is competitive at all is because Greg Gianforte is the candidate, and he had that whole controversy with punching the journalist during the campaign. That almost cost him the election, but didn't. He won by, I think, 9 points, which was a very big margin considering the severity of what he did. But still, I think that's mostly died down. I think the Democrats will try to bring it back up again and use it against him, but I don't think they'll succeed. And for that reason, I think it's likely that the Democrats will not win that state, and Greg Gianforte will keep it for the Republicans. Now going over to Nebraska. There's this one district here, Omaha, that was just recently won by the Republicans in 2017. It used to be Democratic held before that point, but in 2016 the Republicans took it. It did, however, go to Hillary Clinton, I believe, in 2016, despite voting in majority for Republican in the House of Representatives. And this state is a lot of uncertainty overall, but I would call it likely for Democrats with some degree of uncertainty, because it's comparable to this district in Colorado as well. It could come down to just a general consensus on approval for Trump, and if that's the case, then it'll be won by the Democratic challenger. If not, then it could be won by the Republican challenger. But I'd say this district could go to the Democrats, despite it being listed as leaning by most polling places. Okay, now going to Nevada, that's another big battleground state like Minnesota, because there's two districts here that are that could go to the Republicans, because these are both districts that were recently won by the Democrats. Democrats won both these seats just in 2016 from the Republicans. Most would list both these districts as leaning and not likely. And looking at it, Democrats' worst case scenario is they lose one. I don't think that they'll lose both. They think they could lose one. Best case scenario, the Democrats get nothing because there's no other Republican challenge seats in the state. Likely scenario, I think Democrats will keep these seats. Maybe the Republicans could have won a seat here when Trump's approval was higher, but now it's gone back down, as I've talked about in my past presidential election prediction videos, and for that reason, I think that the Democrats could keep both these seats, including Jackie Rosen's seat, who's not running in 2018 and who's running instead for Senate. But I'm just going to put a question mark there because there's some degree of uncertainty as well. Now to New Hampshire, all the way over here. Most would call this seat solidly in the Democrats' column, so I won't be talking about that too much. We'll be talking about this seat. As we can see, this is a seat that does not have an incumbency advantage for the Democrats. Carol Shea Porter, or Shea Porter, I'm not sure you pronounce that part of her name, will not be running in 2018. She just recently won this seat from the Republicans in 2017, or in 2016 rather. And there's a certain amount of riskiness for the Democrats in this seat overall. However, this state overall is trending towards Democrats, as we've seen with Trump approval in general, and I think it's likely the Democrats will keep that seat, which is good for them because they need to hold on to each and every single one of their incumbent seats in order to have a good chance of holding majority, as you're already starting to see as I'm calling these seats. This video is probably already over 20 minutes long already, and I'm probably barely halfway done. It's going to be a long video. As I've said before, my voice is already starting to crack and give out. I hope I can make it through. Alright, so let's go over to New Jersey. Another big battleground state, as we can see here. A number of seats that are Democratic held that are likely. Let's just go through it down here. Two Democratic incumbent held seats that are likely in their column. One Republican seat that's leaning in the Republicans' column, and two Republican seat toss-ups. Worst case scenario, I think the Democrats will win at least one seat. Given the fact that there's one seat that's already risky for the Republicans, given the fact that there's two toss-ups, or there should be two toss-ups in this state overall, I think the Democrats will win at least one. Yeah, there's one Republican seat that's already being called towards Democrats, so I think the Democrats will win at least that one seat and maybe lose that toss-up in their worst-case scenario. Best-case scenario, Democrats win 3 seats. That's this toss-up, that's this district that's already called in their column, and that's this district that's already just leaning in the Republicans' column. That's their best-case scenario. I think it's a pretty reasonable best-case scenario. Likely scenario, I think the Democrats will win 2. That'll most likely be this seat and this seat up here. This is another state that Democrats could win big in. as we're starting to see. New Mexico, there's just one seat that can be talked about, and that's this seat here. And that's mostly because there's no incumbency advantage. But overall, I'd say that the Republicans are likely to keep that seat. I don't think Democrats can take it, even with the Hispanic factor and even without the incumbency advantage for the Republicans. Now going to New York, that's probably the second biggest chance the Democrats have at taking the majority. It's ironic that both California and New York, the most Democratic states in the Union, probably are the keys for the Democrats to win in 2018. And I think that's a pretty fair reflection on the fact that many Democratic states are just becoming more Democratic overall as a result of the Trump incumbency. All right, but I digress, I guess. So looking at New York, there's 3 Republican seats that are likely in their column instead of solid, including, I guess it's 4 now, because I did this before the whole Chris Collins scandal with him doing insider trading. I think this seat should be leaning instead of likely. I think that this seat has a pretty good shot at going to Democrats, especially after Chris Collins and everything. And the fact that he's still running, or he suspended the campaign today and he's most likely not going to be running in 2018. Yeah, I can't imagine his advisors will let that happen. But overall, I think that this seat has a pretty good shot at going to the Democrats. One Democrat seat likely, 2 Republican seat toss-ups, 1 Republican seat leaning in the Republicans column, and 1 Republican seat uncertain. And that's the seat here because not enough polling stations has given any remarks on this seat yet. So that's what I mean by uncertain. Worst case scenario, I think the Democrats will win at least 1 seat, given the fact that there's 2 toss-ups, and that's a number of likely seats, including this 1 seat that should probably turn toss-up soon. So I think most likely Democrats will win at least 1 seat. Best case scenario, Democrats win 5 seats. That's these 2 seats up here. That's maybe 2 seats here, and that 1 seat from Chris Collins. That's a very big best case scenario. Likely scenario, I think that the Democrats will win 3. I think the Democrats will win both these seats up here, and maybe this seat over here on Long Island that most are listing as leaning Republican, not likely Democrat, and maybe Chris Collins seats as well could go to their column. Just given the fact that using that against whichever, and also the lack of preparation the Republicans are going to have to try to replace a candidate in the seat is going to be a big factor as well. So I think this seat could go Democrat, despite the fact that that's only likely in the Republicans column. Now going down to North Carolina. As we can see here, there's 2 Republican seats that are likely, 1 Republican seat that's leaning, and 1 Republican seat that's a toss-up. Worst case scenario, I think Democrats would win no seats, that will not win this seat, that they will not win this seat either, and that everything will just stay the same. Best case scenario, the Democrats take the seat that's leaning in the Republicans column, and they also take this seat that's a toss-up. Likely, I think Democrats will take the 1 toss-up seat down here just because of the lack of incumbency advantage on the Republican side, and the fact that this state could rebel against Trump and Republican economics overall, especially after the tax plan that was passed. I think it'll be a big factor in this seat down here. Going down to Ohio, as we've already started to see after the special election, I know there's still absentee ballots to call and everything, but this seat looks like it's going to be in Troy Balderson's column after everything. And this seat is still a toss-up regardless, but still I think it's probably going to go to him, especially since he already won in the last special election. I think it's a big factor in his column. Worst case scenario, Democrats win nothing. They don't win this seat, and they don't win this seat either. These are really the only 2 seats I'll be talking about. Best case scenario, they win this seat from Trey Balderson and this seat down here, which most listed as a toss-up. So likely, I think Democrats will win maybe this seat down here or this seat over here. Not both. I think that Democrats will win one or the other. Probably this seat down here, since most listed as a toss-up. In Pennsylvania, the redistricting and redrawing of the district maps is a big factor for the Democrats, which I think is probably the main reason why they'll win, why they could win big in this state. Two Republican seats likely, two Democrat seats likely, two Democrat or incumbent seats likely, two Republican seat toss-ups, and one Republican seat uncertain. I don't remember which one that was. That was uncertain, but usually when I list something as uncertain, it's mostly just because there was some sort of big scandal there or something along those lines. But if we're looking at it here, worst case scenario, Democrats will win one seat. I think that they'll win at least one seat here. As we can see, there's already one Republican seat that's leaning in their column, and there's one open seat here that's still to be determined. I think they'll win. I think that they'll, in their best case scenario, or in their worst case scenario, they'll probably win one or the other. Best case scenario, they win both these seats. They win this toss-up, and they keep these redistrict maps that are Republican now, but won't be in 2018, and they win like one or two likely seats. Likely scenario, I think the Democrats will win 3, and that's probably going to be this one here, this toss-up here, and the seat that's already leaning in their column, or maybe one of the other seats that are redistrict in their favor. Going down to Texas, there's a number of different factors to consider when calling this state in general, namely the fact that there's one toss-up here, one toss-up in Houston, and one toss-up in southern Florida. Most would list this state leaning in, most would list this district in Dallas leaning in the Republicans column, and most would list this district as toss-up and this one as toss-up as well. So for that reason, the worst case scenario, I think Democrats will win just one of these districts. And best case scenario, I think that they'll win 4, meaning that they'll win this one in southern Florida, this one in Dallas, and this one, all 3 toss-ups in Houston, and then this one likely seat in central Texas. That's their best case scenario. The likely scenario is ironically the same as their worst case scenario, and that's just one seat, because I don't think the Democrats are doing a very good job at campaigning in Florida. I think that the one seat that they'll win is probably this one in southern Florida. Not Florida. Jesus, sorry, I've been doing this video for too long. I think that they'll probably win this district down in southern Texas, or maybe this one in Houston. There's 3 toss-ups. I think they'll win at least one of them, and that's their likely scenario, which isn't good for them. They should be doing better in Texas, but they're not. Now over to Utah. There's only one seat that's leaning in the Republicans' column that I don't think will go to the Republicans, or I think that will go to the Republicans overall. And worst case scenario for the Democrats, they don't win that seat. Best case scenario, they edge that seat out. Likely scenario, they don't win that seat at all. Going over to Virginia, that's another state that the Democrats could win pretty big in. If we're looking at here, one Republican seat that's leaning, one Republican seat that's already leaning Democrat. That's Barbara Comstock's seat up here, and then 2 Republican seat toss-ups. Worst case scenario, I think Democrats will win at least one seat, considering that there's already one seat Republican held that's already leaning in their column, and there's 2 toss-ups as well. This district here should be toss-up, but it's just the average of whatever 270 win makes it. Likely, I think they'll win 2. This one up here, maybe 1 toss-up, either this one or that one. I think it's a likely scenario that the Democrats will win 2 seats in Virginia. Now going over to Washington. As we can see here, there's one district that's a toss-up, and then there's one district over here that's most listed as a toss-up as well. But averaged together, it's a lean in the Republicans' column. Worst case scenario, I think that the Democrats could win nothing. Best case scenario, Democrats win both this district and this district over here. And the likely scenario, the Democrats could win nothing. I don't think that... I analyzed this district separately, and the incumbent, or not the incumbent, but the challenger, the Republican challenger in this seat is outraising the Democratic challenger. And, I mean, it's kind of hard to call. If you guys have any questions specifically regarding this, which I could understand, please leave them down below, and I'll be more in depth about it. But I don't think the Democrats will win anything in this state. Not going to West Virginia, there's really just one state that's worthwhile to be talking about, and that's this one down here. That's the one that, I don't remember the candidate's name, but he's been all over social media. He's the one who voted for Trump. He made news by that as a Democrat, and he is a former combat veteran. However, this district did go to Trump by an overwhelming 30 points. Evan Jenkins, and that's really the main factor in making this this district a lean in the Republicans' column, is the fact that it went 30 points to Trump. But there's no incumbency advantage. The Democratic candidate is probably the best candidate to run in this district overall. And if we're looking at it here, best case scenario, Democrats could win that seat with that candidate. Likely, I don't think that they'll win it. There's a lot of uncertainty around it just because of the many different polarizing and opposite factors that could negate each other in this state. Going over to Wisconsin, there's really just that one district down here that's worthwhile to be talking about, and that's Paul Ryan's district. He will not be running in I think it says a lot that the Speaker of the House's district is going to be, is listed by most as a toss-up. I think that's a pretty negative message for the Republican Party to have. But overall, I think that Democrats could win that one seat from Paul Ryan, just because the candidate that they're running is a former veteran. He has very good approval, and he's been doing pretty well in this district overall. Okay, now that is every single competitive state. That was a long video. Now let's wrap it up. The current House of Representatives, Democrats 193, Republicans 236, 4 Republican vacancies, and 2 Democratic vacancies. That's the current House. Now, in the Democrats' worst case scenario, they have a net gain of 1 seat. Even the Democrats' worst case scenario, and this is all the worst case scenario calculations that up here add into 1, they still gain 1 seat, and the Republicans hold the majority in the Democrats' worst case scenario. In the Democrats' best case scenario, they gain 62 seats, which is a lot. Most polls would not have it that much, but I analyzed it district by district, so that's just what it came down to. I didn't put that number there before. That's just what the calculations led it to, and that's in their best case scenario. So 62 seats, and the Democrats hold the majority by 33 seats. The likely scenario, with all these calculations taken into consideration, it's 221 Democrats to 214 Republicans. The Democrats have a net gain of 28 seats, and they hold the majority by a very slim margin of 4 seats. That is my prediction. I think it's the most in-depth prediction that most channels could possibly make without a video being ridiculously long. If you have any questions, like I said, place them down below, and I'll go in depth. And just looking at this, 4 seats, people keep talking about a blue wave overall in the House of Representatives, but this is a very slim margin for the Democrats to have. The Republicans won 60 seats in 2010 or 2012, I don't remember, but they won 60 seats and took the majority by a lot in 2010. So the fact that Democrats aren't doing nearly as well, or at least based on my prediction, not even half as well as Republicans did, should tell the Democrats that they're doing something wrong. But overall, this is my prediction. Hope you guys enjoyed it. My voice is completely shot. If you have any questions, like I said, please leave them down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.